Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the C-Man, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the C-Man's Cinema. Sit down, it's time to talk about everybody's favorite variant. Once again, there's no time to be wasted because it's spoiler-heavy talk time, and, well, he's already up on the screen, so why don't you pull up a chair, take a seat. We're getting ready to dive in spoiler-filled into Loki. Episode 2, the Nexus event, and as I said in my non-spoiler review, which, if you have not watched the episode, I mean, this is about to be spoiler-littered, man. Like, strap in, we gonna be here a while talking about all the spoilers from this episode. So if you haven't watched it, or you just want, like, my general overall thoughts, and you're not here to dive into, like, the full spoiler recap yet, jump up there, man. Go check out that non-spoiler review. Watch the episode if you haven't. Then come back and enjoy our spoiler discussion. As always, there will be chapter markers down below in the description, so make sure you check those out so you can just hit all the things that you want to hear me talk about, because I'm about to empty the tank. But before we dive into on the full breakdown, just my overall spoiler thoughts. First and foremost, we've been saying it since week 1. Something seemed off about the TVA, and it doesn't take more than 4 episodes, just 4, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how long it took WandaVision to really get rolling, you know what I mean? And by episode 4 of Loki, we already have an answer, at least to the first part, about what's going on with the TVA, and that's that the Timekeepers are a load of bull honky, man. They are straight up androids, which is hysterical, because if you think about, you know, what we've talked about in the grand scheme of the Marvel Universe, and how, you know, space and science and politics and all this stuff kind of plays into different villains or big bads that you could have in all these different departments, right? So you got your magic area with your wizards, you got your science area with your androids, you got, like I said, that kind of just government type political, like espionage type stuff that's always tied into Captain America, where there's always some sort of a group as well. And then, of course, you know, you've got your space stuff, your aliens, what's going on up there. And right away, there's a show that has talked about, you know, the Timekeepers being like some sort of alien race, and lo and behold, they're a bunch of androids, because most likely there's probably some sort of alien in the background pulling all the strings. But it certainly does confirm that the suspicions we've had about the TVA should continue. And based on what we see in that finale sequence that we'll talk about in the breakdown section, it would seem that whoever is pulling the strings, you know, whoever is the Wizard of Oz, oh, the Wizard of Oz vibes are big in this episode, but whoever's back there behind the curtain, they clearly thought it was pretty funny that, like, they got found out, because, like, after the decapitation of, you know, the main timekeeper that leads to the discovery that they are androids, the other two just start laughing, like, maniacally, before they kind of shut down and turn off. Which makes me, again, this puts me back in that camp of, like, Kang is coming, baby. He has got to be involved in this somewhere. And while I feel less and less like Sylvie's whole deal is her working for somebody, although, trust me, I think that's 100% still in play. Like, it's one of those, like, Lady Loki, Sylvie, she could win us and Loki over, and by the time we get to the end of this, you know, thing, find out that, like, well, she made a bad mistake before she came around. But I think just with what's going on in the TVA, I think it's certainly pointing to Kang being the guy who's operating everything there. And, like, also just plays right into him being the perfect time villain, right? Like, if you're gonna be a time villain and the TVA doesn't actually exist for you to take out, maybe in that last multiversal war, like, you did take down the Timekeepers and then, you know, made them seem like they were a thing, so you could just manipulate the timelines and do all the things that you want to do to take over control of all sorts of space and time. I mean, it syncs up so perfectly, and when you have Renslayer being your manager of everything, well, that also syncs up in a big bad way. Like, it would make a ton of sense. That seems like the only person who has an inside look, and we haven't seen this confirmed, but just the way that Gugu Mbatha Raw is playing the character and her delivery on certain elements, specifically in this episode, like, there are just things that she says where you're like, you know everything. And, like, we also, you know, get to find out that she was a hunter herself, and hunted the original Sylvie, or the original Lady Loki, rather, as a little tiny kid, man. A little girl just went, picked her, brought her to TVA, and started all this madness. Like, whatever it is, like, I think however she became the manager involved her getting a look into what's going on behind the scenes. But if Ravonna is involved in whatever is actually going on with the TVA behind the scenes, it just seems to scream Kang. And as much as I wanted to, like, last week I was starting to maybe distance myself, like, this is going to be like WandaVision, and we're going to tease a character that we're never going to see. And look, I still think we might not see Kang, but this episode with the TVA back in it pulled me right back into that, like, yeah, I think he's around here somewhere. And just the general reveal, man, I mean, the production value around the inner sanctum for the Timekeepers, and the way that all three of them are kind of up on this wall, and you got this, like, wonderful kind of blue, aqua-ish, like, greenish tint with all this, like, smoke coming through, and then these red laser-type lines behind them, and, like, lighting up the floor. Like, the whole look of the room was, the production value of this episode is fantastic, because obviously pretty much all of it is spent at the TVA, and anytime that we're at the TVA, like, I mean, we've seen that it's gorgeous to look at all the different inner workings of this place, and getting to go into those gold elevators and into that inner sanctum was pretty freaking dope. But the other big thing that we learned was that, Lady Loki was indeed a Lady Loki forever. That was one of the things I kind of missed last week, kind of thinking like, oh, maybe because we've seen him, actually change sex in the comics, like, maybe that's what happened. Like, it was a Loki, a variant version of a Loki, who decided to become a girl. Well, that's not the case. This is actually more like Rick and Morty, which is, fitting, because the writers on this show have worked on Rick and Morty before, and when they deal with the multiverse, something they're very, very experienced in, and totally makes sense on why they were brought in for this show. But like it's like when you go to any other universe and you find out that, there's some female Mortys that are Morticias. So here you just end up with a female Loki. And finding out that she was taken by the TVA as a kid, for a second I was like, oh snap, maybe she did become a TVA agent. Nah. Trusting my brain, I guess, more my gut last week during this review was like, oh, maybe she's a TV agent. And the brain was like, wait, she didn't realize that she couldn't use magic. She probably doesn't work for the TVA. And we get that confirmation that she doesn't work for the TVA, and that she was taken, and then she's been legitimately on the run, jumping all over the timeline, causing all sorts of havoc. And the fact that, like, she wasn't doing anything, man. She was playing with a dragon, and with a Valkyrie, and just kind of like playing like the dragon came to attack Asgard and the Valkyrie saved the day, and boom, like, Ravonna is just there, grabbing her, taking her, and how could a kid impact the timeline in such a way that you take her when she's a child? So, like, that's a pretty big reveal, It was one of those, like, we knew she'd been on the run from the TVA, as she said, her whole life, but it didn't kind of lock in when exactly they took her. And seeing her taken as a kid really led to some interesting things in that sequence. And since we're kind of tiptoeing around that, we might as well just dive right in. Because for me, like, the big thing to talk about, I want to get out of the way, is like, yeah, Timekeepers are a bunch of robots, man. Like, legit Wizard of Oz stuff going on here, instead of it being a projection, though, just physical entities that you could touch. But I mean, just everything that was happening, man. Like, production value, the music was again really good. The score, I love this Loki score, man, and it can go to like these really dark kind of places sometimes, which you get right toward the end with that dum 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 dum. Like, oh man, like, there's the way they play with all of that stuff, and then like the end song at the end of the episode was something that I again really enjoy. Like, the music choices they've had this season, they really fit, and we'll talk about that when we get to the end of the breakdown. But since, like I said, we've been kind of tiptoeing around that big reveal around Sylvie, which is actually where we start. So before we dive in though and do the full breakdown, you gotta see how I was reacting this week, man, because my head done exploded multiple times, and like I got choked up hard, man. I almost started rolling a lot of tears. There's a pretty good emotional beat when they get to that spot for Owen Wilson's Mobius that almost got me. So you guys got to check all that stuff out first. Dude, all this was like a joke the first time. Like, how serious this was for a little girl. Okay, so not an agent. She's been legit on the run. Timekeepers! Oh, God. Dude, this is fucking Kang. I'm a freak out. Are the Timekeepers real? Oh! Oh, look at those eyes! Also, friggin' M or whatever his name is, I think he might be right. I think those might be Time Twisters, not Timekeepers.
Nobody does.
They definitely killed C20, like mafioso style. What is that? Where is that? Is he in Asgard?
Sif! You conniving, craven, pathetic worm! You did this! What? I hope you know you deserve to be alone, and you always will be.
All right. A bad memory prison? How quaint.
Is this just gonna be like a run through
Some
of
punishment?
him being a bad
I
friend?
remember exactly what I did after that.
You conniving, craven.
Oh, it's just the exact same moment on loop.
I hope you know you deserve to be alone, and you always will be.
Oh, Lady Sif.
Come with me.
Yes, Mobius, let's go. Yeah, Mobius, Renslayer knows. Who's she working for?
Just in case anyone ever told you different.
I love them.
I ride a jet ski. That's what I like to do. Just riding around on my jet ski.
Brunette. Wait for me at the elevator.
God. Now he's the most dangerous, Loki. Take them all down.
As promised, the variants.
After all your struggle, at last you've arrived before us. What do you want for your soul before you meet your end?
Is that the only reason you brought us here?
No, I'm not done with you yet.
Oh, B-15, yes! Yes, let's go!
For all time.
Let's go, B-15. Yes! Oh no, she's gotta get prone. Let's go! Sylvie. Yes. Come on.
You're a child of the Timekeepers too, Sylvie. We can talk.
Oh, yeah?
I knew it. They're freaking robots. They're not real. It's like the Wizard of Oz. Yeah. It's a robot. I knew they were freaking moving weird. Just like the Wizard of Oz.
Mindless androids.
This is new for me.
What?
He's gonna kiss himself.
What is it?
Whoa! What? Wait! Wait! What? Really don't know where they're going with this. Dude, they killed Loki. Oh yes. Come on, give me a post credit. Another excellent song choice, by the way. Oh, thank God. So where does it send them?
Is this hell? Am I dead?
Not yet. But you will be unless you come with us.
Loki! Dude, what? What is this show doing? Oh, that's amazing! Come on! So, wait, what? This show is so good. Dude, I get such a good kick out of myself, and this episode elicited a lot of emotion and a lot of reactive type things because it was just like I said, like head exploding all over the place this morning. But let's not waste any more time and jump right on into our full breakdown because we got a lot to talk about. And as I mentioned, that reveal of Sylvie actually being a female little girl, Loki, that gets taken by the TVA is right where we start, man. It's the first thing we see. We see her, like I said, playing with toys, and Ravana Renslayer, as a hunter, comes in and goes, "Yep, that's our variant right there. Take her." And like the genius of this show and its production and like stuff like when I talk about scoring and just like the way you frame or the way you light certain things, like this is a moment in the show that like really speaks to how great the production design and the thought around the design is to how the show plays. Like you go through the entire opening sequence, which mind you, was absolutely hysterical when Loki gets checked into the TVA, right? Like, seeing him go from all those places, constantly falling into all those rooms, like, I was in stitches that first episode. And now, we start episode 4 with seeing, you know, little girl Loki taken through all that, and just a shift in the tone of the score, shift in some of the lighting and where the camera is placed, and all of a sudden, all those things that were hysterical for Tom Hiddleston to go through are terrifying for this little girl Loki to go through. Like, absolute, like, you just sit there and the vibe is this is like sad, this is terrible, and like it's scary. Like you can only imagine how scared this little girl is, and the girl who's playing her like is doing a good job of like being confused and not knowing what's going on, but she never really truly loses her composure. And when she gets brought in front of the manager of that time, I'm telling you, I'm so fascinated to find out how Ravana went from being a hunter to the manager. And I have a feeling Kang could be the connection to how that all happens, and I hope we get to see it, man. I want to see that stuff happen. But as she gets brought in front of the manager, she immediately kind of attacks Ravana and ends up swiping her tempad. And as soon as she does, I guess this is just a Loki thing, man. Like, they just understand how to, no matter what Loki you are, figure out technology quick. Like, just punches a bunch of things, boom, opens up her first door, and she's gone. And what we end up finding out a little bit later is that from that point forward, it was just jumping around the timelines until she realized that living in apocalypses was the only way to not be noticed. Like, she just created branches and branches and nexus events everywhere she goes, and then has to basically live her entire life in 1,000 end of the world. It's this really wonderful line we'll hit when we get there, because I took a note on it. But nevertheless, like, great cold open, and then right from that you jump back before the cold open finishes to present time, and you see Gugu Mbatha Raw's Ravana going in to the inner sanctum of the Timekeepers, and there they are. You can see them outlined in like a silhouette up on the wall, and their eyes are glowing. And like immediately, I watched a new Rockstar video where they talked about in the comics one of the biggest foes for the Timekeepers are a variant version of themselves called the Time Twisters, and the general look and shape of their heads at that moment in time looked very similar to what the Time Twisters look like in the comics. I was like, oh shoot, man, are we gonna find out that like the Timekeepers aren't Timekeepers? And we do. It just ends up being that they are the Timekeepers. They're just robots. But that shot and visual right away, I was like, oh man, like what are we gonna find out about the Timekeepers in this episode? And they do a great job of keeping all of that from you the whole episode, and then hitting you the second time. We're like, oh shoot, we really are gonna get to go in real this time. So I loved that entire cold open. And then as we come back, we open with, Ravana coming out from that meeting that's right before the Loki title cards come up. And, you get one of these things where, like, there's just this vibe in almost every scene that Ravana has this week with Mobius that just makes it feel like she is lying through her teeth on everything. And as she comes out of that meeting that we see, right at the end of the cold open, which is in present time, it's not like back when she took, young Lady Loki. She comes in, first person she sees is Mobius. And right away, like, Mobius asking questions, she's like, yo, like, Mobius, chill. Like, under the best of circumstances, it's, like, jarring to be in front of the Timekeepers. And what's going on right now is not the best of circumstances, because, as we know, like, the Loki, we've now gone back to the Loki's breaking out, and this is where we're picking up, right? Like, what's happening, the fallout at the TVA. And, Ravana is, like, you can tell that she is just putting on a show for Mobius to make it seem like she is scared, like she is nervous, like she is afraid of these robotic timekeepers, or robotic timekeepers. There we go, my quotes right. But and also just kind of pushes that wizard from the Wizard of Oz vibe that I've been saying for the last couple weeks. Like, it feels like there is a production into making people believe that these timekeepers are real, and by the time you get to the end of the episode and find out that they're not, then when you go back and rewatch, all these moments with Ravana just scream that she is full of shit the whole show. And she's clearly the person or our way to finding out what is actually going on with the Timekeepers, as, Sylvie also clearly thinks by the end of the episode. But from there, Ravana just keeps throwing BS at Mobius. She's like, the Timekeepers, don't, like, because he says the Timekeepers can't blame you. And she's like, they can, and they do. And, like, Ravana just keeps, slinging her BS. And this moment, speaks, like, I would love to talk to Gugu Mbatha Raw and be like, so, at this moment in time, like, was this a conscious decision? Because she kind of looks at Mobius after he asks her, or says to her, he's like, well, look, everything's going on. They can't blame you. Like, it's not your fault. And she's like, they can and they do. And, like, just the way she says it to Mobius, you're like, there's like a beat. There's like a full pause beat before she keeps going. And it's like, it feels like she's coming up with that on the spot. And like, the also like the way that like she's just kind of spewing stuff, and all of a sudden she's like, look, like I was the one that gave you the permission to bring this other Loki in, which then immediately made me go, wait, permission? Like, I get it was a mission to go find him, but like, if you granted permission to just go snag this Loki, like, was the reason Loki got picked up not because he took the Tesseract, but because Ravonna greenlit it for this investigation to chase down the other Loki? Like, it almost seems like there wasn't a Nexus event that Loki created, but rather they just went and snagged him, saying that there was a Nexus event. That was the vibe, just off of how like the performance was playing from Gugu Mbatha was giving there. Like, those were the vibes I was getting. But like after that, like, you know, Mobius kind of swings it and starts asking about C20, and he's like, "Hey, can I go talk to C20?" And Ravonna like immediately like shuts it down. Is like, "No, you can't do it." And Mobius is like, "But like, seemed like she was okay, man." And she's like, "That Loki variant like messed her mind up, and like she's dead, like died." Again, like as soon as she says it, you're like, well, that's a load of crap. And Mobius, I think, also kind of is feeling that right from the get-go. Like, it just feels like everything she's saying here is just a bunch of lies. And again, that's the thing that just keeps screaming in the back of my head. Kang. He's back there somewhere, man. But from the TVA, we jump back to Lamentus 1, where Loki and Sylvie have just kind of accepted their fates. And we get that gorgeous shot that we saw in the trailer of, you know, Loki sitting across from what looked like a Black Widow. But it turns out it's just Sylvie. And you get this really wonderful... I've really come a long way in liking Last Week, just because of all the relationship building they do for these two characters, and this is the payoff. Like, that episode last week is how you're able to get to where you are this week, where all of a sudden there's just this like crazy honest connection between Sylvie and Loki. Like, as they kind of accept their fates, like, there's no reason to put up a front or to lie anymore. Like, it's game over, and Loki just comes clean and straight up is just like, I'm sorry, you know, and just apologizes for everything. And as he's doing it, like, you know, Lady Loki puts her hand on his arm in a way where you're like, there is a bond between these two, where, like, you know, last week when they were talking about, like, have you ever, like, had somebody, and it's like, you know, you have things, but it's never real. Like, all of a sudden it feels like that real connection is starting to surge between two versions of the same person. Which would make a lot of sense, and you're just like feeling this general energy between the two of them where like they're definitely on the same page and they're playing for the same team at this point. Like, there are no more lies or anything like that. And as all that's happening, you get these gorgeous visuals of this planet cracking apart and crashing into Lamentus. Like, as it gets closer, like the entire sky is just broken pieces of this planet. And like throughout this whole sequence, just a couple of the shots. I mean, there's one from space where you're just looking down at Lamentus. Like, it's gorgeous, dude. Like I said, the production value on this show is insane. I mean, they're all insane on these shows. And it looks so good. But, you know, right after, you know, she kind of like holds on to Loki or whatever, she just opens up and she states that she remembers Asgard, you know, and certainly remembers like the places and the things and some of the people, because she was taken so young. And then like she states that like she kind of like tells him the origin we just watched without directly telling him the origin. You can see like she's slowly starting to bring her guard down. And like it kind of starts with like she just kind of talking this stuff about how like the world in general wants to be free, wants to break free. Like, that's why all of these, it almost feels like she's saying like that's the reason all of these like timeline breaks, you know, keep popping up. And, you know, because of that, like the world just creates chaos. And, you know, that chaos sometimes is in the form of a little girl, you know, and making that little girl like the trickster god. And, you know, she just kind of says that like, you know, it was all great until, like, her existence caused a big enough detour from that sacred timeline that the TVA just comes and scoops her up as a kid. And then she has to grow up on the run until she figures out, you know, the apocalypse thing. And then this line is gorgeous. She's like, I grew up at the ends of 1,000 worlds, and now that's where I'll die. And you're just like, God, man, like, they are really, like, we know Mobius is going to end up saving the day somehow. But, like, they're, like, really playing into the fact, like, this is game over, folks. And just as, like, that, like, raw emotion is just, like, happening, and, like, you're feeling this energy between the two of them, we jump back to the TVA, and what do they see? They're watching. It's so funny, too, because they know that they're hiding in, you know, apocalypses, but, like, at some point, I guess they're going to have some sort of plan to go do something. Whenever that pops up, they're going to jump. So they're just waiting for a deviation to happen, and all of a sudden, you see a new branch break out, and it just starts going this way. Like, straight up. Like, most of our branches have kind of been on, like, you know, a general trajectory. This thing's almost going up like a straight 90 degrees. And right away, like, when they start to see it, like, you see, like, Wunmi Masaku's character, B-15, like, she's totally taken aback. Like, what is this? Like, we've never seen anything like that. Like, what's happening to the timeline? And Wilson will touch on it later, but, like, the connection between these two Lokis and them, like, syncing up on the same page seems to be creating enough of a variation, you know, off of the path of the sacred timeline that, like, it could bring the whole thing down, which is so fascinating and like such a cool concept to take these two characters that you're now gonna have to build back, I'm sure, together as they're currently apart. And, like, I'm sure Lady Loki, she's gonna be pissed next week, because she's certainly pissed at the end of this episode. So as we see that coming at the TVA, we jump back to Loki and Sylvie, and, like, the end is coming, man. Like, you're just seeing these giant pieces hit the moon, and, like, you can just see, like, the end is very imminent. And I think right before we even jump back to this moment, you get, like, another wonderful spot from Sylvie where she just kind of asks, like, do you think what makes a Loki is that we're just destined to lose? And Loki's immediately like, no, that's not. Like, we might lose sometimes, but, like, we never die. You can't get rid of us. Like, we're survivors. Like, that's what we do. And, like, you can just tell as she's telling her story to Loki that he's, like, in awe of her. Like, the fact that she got dealt the hand she got dealt and handled it the way she handled it and is at the place that she's at when he meets her, like, you can tell he is just fascinated by her. And right as the end is about to hit him, you know, and they're just kind of both sitting there holding hands, like, totally okay, like, this is it. Two doors pop up, and in comes the TVA to save the day. And, of course, it's not like it's one of those, like, yes, everybody's going to be okay. But then we jump back to the TVA, and again, that score just swings right into one of those melodramatic beats where, like, you're like, oh, shoot, now they're both arrested. And you see them, they got the collars on, and they're being led to interrogation rooms. And, like, they're both kind of looking at each other, and as they start to get separated, like, you see Loki trying to fight hard to get to her. And then you get this wonderful bit, like, you know, you have Ravana has got Sylvie, Mobius has got Loki, and it's like 4 or 5 guards on Sylvie and only 2 guards on Loki. And as him and Mobius start to kind of bicker back and forth, he's like, I deserve as many guards as her. Like, this is absolutely ridiculous. Like, the way Loki is just able to play to the moment and try to push people's buttons, like, or get somebody to respond that could give him an opening. Like, I just love watching Hiddleston play with that at any point in time. And, you know, it is one of those things where, like, you know, the vibe is obviously more aggressive than it was at the beginning, but getting Loki and Mobius back is just, like, I got so excited to see what we were going to get next, and unfortunately it's not nearly as fun as the first time they met, because these two guys are clearly at odds. I mean, you have Mobius, who 100% feels betrayed by Loki, right? Like, he trusted Loki. Loki was actually helping out the investigation. Like, they were figuring things out. They were working together as a team, and then he bounces. And we obviously know that, like, Loki didn't really have a choice there. Like, with what he finds out before that moment, he had to go. So, of course, in Loki's head, he doesn't think he's betrayed Mobius. Like, if anything, he's been trying to figure more things out that could potentially help Mobius. And the fact that he now knows that all the TVA agents are variants, like, what he's done is something that could end up helping Mobius. And on the flip side, Loki is 100% feeling betrayed by Mobius because Mobius didn't give him a chance to, like, talk it out. It was just slap cuffs on him, bring him into this interrogation room, kind of berate him, and when Loki just kind of responds back with the same sort of aggressive manner that, you know, Mobius is bringing because he's hurt, it just kind of shuts the conversation down right away, and, you know, Mobius ends up calling, like, Loki to his face, like, you know what you are, man, you're an asshole and a bad friend. Like, that's what you are. And then he puts him in a time cell. He pulls up this, like, red glowing door instead of the orange ones that we've seen, and we end up finding out that this is like a memory that somehow Mobius was able to access and pick specifically to kind of loop Loki through. And as he's kind of like shoving him, you know, taking him out to throw him into this room or this cell, you know, Loki's protesting, and Mobius is like, all right, fine, one last trick from the trickster god. What do you got? And Loki simply just says, the TVA is lying to you. And, you know, Mobius laughs it off and says, throw him in there. And, you know, off he goes. But there, again, it's like the subtle nuances in the performances. When Owen Wilson, like, finds or hears that, while he plays it off like it's no big deal, you can tell almost immediately that it strikes a chord where, like, Mobius is now, like, what does he mean the TVA is lying? Lying about what? Like, it's so open-ended. And you can tell it's something that bothers Mobius, and certainly is apparent that it's bothering Mobius by everything he does after this moment. But Loki, in the meantime, gets thrown into this memory loop. And like I said, I don't know how the TVA is able to access, you know, Loki's memories, or maybe they're just... Maybe in the file, they know these moments where it's like, hey, if we were ever going to put them in a time cell, let's send them back to this period in time, and we'll just loop it over and over. And it's like the first head explosion moment, because he's standing in a room that clearly is on Asgard. Like, that's how good the production value is like, as soon as you see the room, you know you're in Asgard, just by, like, the stuff that's on the walls, and the torches, and just the way the room looks and how it's lit. Immediately, you know you're in Asgard. And Loki also immediately knows that he's in Asgard. He's like, oh, I know what this is. And then Lady Sif comes walking out, and she, as we know, was supposed to be in Ragnarok, but because of filming conflicts, got written out of the script. And this isn't like, you know, present day, like she survived Ragnarok. The story, she was supposed to die, you know, with the Warriors 3, but because of the scheduling conflict, she was just written out. But nevertheless, just seeing her, even if this is back in time before Asgard's destroyed, obviously, like, it was so cool because it's been so long since we have seen her, and this scene is so much fun. Like, she comes in and she's just holding a clump of her hair, and she's like, you did this. And it's like one of those, like, you immediately understand why Mobius picked this moment in time, because it feeds right off the last thing that he says to Loki, which is that you're a bad friend. And this is a moment where Loki was a bad friend, you know? After a night out, probably, he thought it'd be funny to just cut off half, you know, a good chunk of Sif's hair. Like, just, you grab it, one cut, and bounced. And she clearly wakes up, finds this, and she is livid and knows that it's Loki. And she basically just, like, comes after him straight up. And, you know, after I think like 2 times through where Loki gets, I think you see him get kneed like 3 times and punched 3 times, and told every single time that he is alone and deserves to be alone and will always be alone. Like, Sif is pushing the, like, you're always going to be alone because you're a jerk. But after like a few of these, I mean, you know, Loki, as a guy, I get it, man. And he starts just trying to come clean, and he tries to explain everything to Sif. You know, it's like, look, this is some sort of like prison that, like, is a loop, and I don't know what's going on. Like, you got to help me escape from here. And she, like, kind of like is eyeing him up and is like, okay, helps him up, and is just kind of like, hold him here, and then boom, knees him again. oh man, the whole scene is just hysterical, but like a little bit heartbreaking too, because, you know, it's like, just like, it would suck to have to repeat over and over a mistake, and a mistake that's so small in the grand scheme of the world, but when it's thrown in your face like that so many times, like, it really does make you realize that, like, maybe I'm not a good friend, which is probably exactly what Mobius is going for by putting him in this particular cell. Anywho, we jump back into the TVA. Mobius has gone to Ravana, and since Loki is kind of in timeout, he wants to interrogate Sylvie, who he now knows is named Sylvie because Loki, I believe, tells him that her name is Sylvie, and he's like, yeah, okay, Sylvie, yeah, what is that, with an IE or with just an I? Like, just kind of playing it off when they're interrogating. But that's what he wants to do. And I think at some point he mentions, too, like, Sylvie to Ravana. And Ravana's like, what? She's like, that's what the variant calls herself. Like, Loki told me. But he goes in, and immediately she's like, nope, too dangerous. Like, she's way too dangerous. You just go work on your Loki. And, Mobius isn't quite understanding why. And, like, is just kind of pushing. He's like, look, like, if I can talk to her, maybe I can figure this thing out. And Ravana is just dead set. Like, you are not allowed to talk to that variant. She's like, you just go deal with your own mess. And, like, I think at one point he goes, like, if there's a mastermind here, it's not Loki. He's like, you gotta let me talk to Sylvie to find out, like, what's really going on. And she's like, well, instead Ravana just comes back with, like, well, if it's not Loki, that means it's just all the easier to break him. So go finish your job and do what you're supposed to do. And again, just in the back, like that moment, the way that Ravana delivers it, you're just like, Kang, he's behind all of this, man. Like the name just reverberated in my head the whole freaking episode, even though I was trying not to have it do that. But outside of the office, Mobius leaves, he talks to B-15 and just sees all the guards. And he's like, man, like it's crazy. Like, look at this. Like, we've brought in Kree, Titans, vampires. I was like, that was one of those ones where I was like, ooh, we just confirmed vampires are for real in the world, which is great because we know Blade is coming. But he's like, but it's the orphan trickster god that's like just the biggest pain in the ass to us. And like B-15 is just like, hey, you were the one that wanted to bring a second one of those into this whole equation. Like all of this going on right now is your fault. And he kind of is like, just like, it's just your idea. He's like, hey, I'll share credit on that one with you. But then B-15 is like, so did Loki say anything to you when you interrogated him? And he's like, well, just that the TVA is lying, but we all know that's a load of garbage. I guess I'll go back to work. And the camera just kind of stays with B-15 for a minute. You can tell right away. Like, it's very minor, but again, like, this is what I mean when, like, you're really watching really impressive performances from everybody, because the nuance and slight subtleties, just like one beat moments where it's like you get this feeling that when as soon as Mobius said that, it struck a chord inside of B-15, and it 100% does, as we'll get to see later. Like, she's having kind of like, enchantment hangover and is like remembering, it almost feels like a blackout the way she kind of is talking about. Like when you're remembering things from a blackout and it's kind of fuzzy, but you're like, something is off. And now hearing that the TVA is lying to them, it's only enhancing that feeling inside of B-15. So there's just one beat moment. Like, it's just a look and it's over and gone in a second. But Masaku nails it to the point where you're like, you understand as the viewer, like that hit her. You know what I mean? And being that she was under the enchantment, it makes a ton of sense. Then we go back to Loki, who looks completely broken, right? Like, it's clearly, like, he's now been in this cell for, like, 15 minutes or so, and, like, every 3 minutes or so, like, he's getting kneed and punched in the face, and not just that, but, like, verbally told over and over again, you will always be alone, you deserve to be alone, like, and he totally gets it. So Sif comes in this time, and he's just like a broken little kid, like, no more, please. Can we just stop? And he comes clean. And this is an episode where, like I said before, like when he's with Sylvia as the world is about to end, you get a really honest, open look inside of Loki. Like, his guard is always up. He's always doing exactly what he needs to do in order to survive whatever situation he is in. But every once in a while in this show, we have gotten looks at a genuine Loki, whether it's time by himself with Sylvie, or here. And like, it's to the point where it's like, okay, it's been beaten into me and I get it, so maybe if I just come clean, I won't get hit again. And he just openly, honestly, like, apologizes to Sif. He's like, wait, please stop, no more. He's like, I'm sorry. He's like, I did it because I thought it would get a laugh, and I do these things because I crave attention. And he takes like a hard pause, but he's like, because I'm a narcissist. And I am legitimately scared of being alone. And he's, for the last 10-15 minutes, had alone literally beat into him by Sif. And this time Sif kind of helps him up and doesn't knee him, but still delivers that gut punch of like, you know you're alone and you're always going to be alone. And like, that's just one of those things that you can see gets to Loki, because it's something that he's clearly always been battling with, right? Like when he's talking with Sylvie on the train, you know, he's like, yeah, I've had things, but never anything real. You know, it always seems to slip my fingers, you know, my grasp. And you're feeling all of that in Loki here. And then the cool thing is every time Sif comes back into the room, you get that, you know, kind of like rewind noise. And this time there's no rewind noise, but you hear someone coming. And it, of course, is Mobius, because he's been directed to come back and take, you know, Loki in for interrogation. And we go into the interrogation for round 2. And I love every aspect of this conversation between the two of them, because earlier they're both guarded really quick because they're both really, really frustrated. But now, you know, you've got, I think Mobius, you know, like we said, like they're both kind of disappointed in how each other is treating the other. And, you know, kind of like you've broken some of this trust. And while you feel that a ton from Mobius in that first scene, you feel a little bit from Loki, but not a ton of betrayal, just kind of more frustration. Like, I know stuff, you're not even giving me a second to tell you anything. And this time, there's obviously, I think, more frustration from, you know, Mobius, because he's being directed to, like, you have to go talk to that one. So, like, if I don't get anything out of him, there's no way I can talk to any of these other people. And now Loki's been being beat up and reminded that he's going to be alone forever for 15 minutes. And you're just kind of sitting there going, like, yeah. And now Loki's guard is back up because he feels betrayed by Mobius. Like, you didn't give me a shot to explain myself. You just, you know, immediately said that I betrayed you and then threw me in jail. So their back and forth here is so good because it's completely opposite of their original back and forth in this room. Where, you know, Mobius is kind of trying to win Loki over, and then they're trying to, you know, they start kind of getting on the same page. And now they're on 2 different pages. And, you know, like, as they're going back and forth, you know, you eventually get to a place where Loki is just kind of giving banter to give banter. And Mobius is like, all right, we're not getting anywhere? Hey, we take him back to the cell. And, like, clearly going in that cell traumatized Loki in enough of a way where he was like, no, do not put me back there. And, you know, that just kind of cuts everything out. Loki just sits back down and, you know, he immediately acts like he's coming clean. You know, he's like, it's been me the whole time. I've been pulling all the strings. He's like, she came to me a long time ago, and we came up with this plan, and like, this is all me, this isn't her. And it's like one of those, like, you can tell, like, he's lying to lie and to maybe get himself out of whatever he's in, but also, like, he is 100% trying to protect Sylvie. And instead, like, while he's being, you know, super protective, Mobius is just like, well, you know, it's too bad because she's gone. And, like, Loki immediately stops, like, what are you talking about? She's like, yeah, she put up a fight, you know, like, took out 2 of our guys and then tried to escape again, and B-15 put her down. He's like, you should probably write her a thank you letter, because that makes you the most superior of the Lokis, because you're still alive. And Loki is legit, like, crushed. Like, you can see how just hearing the words, like, Sylvie might not be alive, is hitting him hard. And all of a sudden Mobius just starts laughing. He's like, you like her. Like, you fell for yourself. Like, you are like the epitome of a narcissist. Like, it's just ridiculous. And like, here it is, man. Like, the world is coming to an end, and all you two are doing is just swooning over each other. Like, it's absolutely absurd. And like, Loki is legit, like, losing it, like, internally, man. Like, you can just see it in his face, like, emotionally. He's like, tell me right now, like, is she alive or not? Mobius, like, for now, she is. But, like, this whole thing, it is just, you know, nuts. And as Mobius just kind of pours it on, Loki just has had enough and just lets it out and just kind of raises his voice to a yell above, you know, Mobius. And it's just like, everyone here is a variant. Like, the Timekeepers didn't make the TVA agents. They plucked them from the timeline and forced them to work, erased their memories, like, changed everything. And like, obviously this, you know, catches Mobius off guard. But also, like, Mobius isn't gonna buy it, right? Like, he's like, okay, this is where we're at, throw him back in the cell. And they throw Loki back in. And as he's going in, I just love this line. He's like, of all the liars in this place, you're the biggest one. And Mobius, and he's like, and there's a lot of liars in this place, but you're the biggest. And Mobius is like, why? Because I lied to you about your girlfriend? And he's like, no, that I can respect. It's the lies that you tell yourself. Like, I just gave you the truth, and you brush it off immediately. Like, don't even question it. Like, it's one of those where you can tell, like, Loki knows that Mobius can read him. So he knows that deep down, Mobius knows he's not BSing him here. And he's just not going to listen to it, and he's going to keep playing the TVA game because that's what his life is, and it just makes everything safer if he is a TVA agent. And, you know, like, it's this one of those things where, again, you get this moment where just in Owen Wilson's face, you can tell that moment strikes a chord with him and shifts what he does the rest of the way. And then what's cool is you go from there, where Loki's getting tossed back into his cell, to B-15 outside of standing in front of a poster that says, you know, did you get them all? And it shows like a human and like a variant and a line of variants or whatever. And like, she is the inner turmoil that is going on inside of her. She's kind of grappling with all these things that she's grappling with. You know, it's clear that something is bothering her, and then she just storms right in to Sylvie's interrogation room. You know, she tells the two guards, like, I'm going in there. And she's like, you know, kind of confronts her, and Sylvie's immediately like, all right, man, you want to go? Let's go. And, you know, B-15 opens up a door and takes Sylvie through. And we jump back to Mobius, who's now celebrating with Ravana. I guess they've gotten everything they need at this point, and all that's left is to bring the Lokis in front of the Timekeepers, who've requested to oversee the pruning, and they want Mobius there, so it's time to have a drink again. And the first thing that Ravana asks Mobius is like, if you could go anywhere, anytime, where would you go? And, you know, Mobius is just like, yeah, you know, I'd dig the job, but can we talk about C-20? Because, like, it's getting me. Like, when we came back, like, she seemed like she was, sure, a little loopy, but certainly coherent enough. And I don't get why I can't, how, like, she lost her mind. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to Mobius that, like, she's dead because she lost her mind from the enchantment, because she seemed like she was out of it and was coming into lucidity. And it's one of these things, like, he's pushing these buttons because he believes Loki a little bit deep down, or at least respects Loki enough where it's like, maybe Loki isn't telling me a load of garbage. Let me push the buttons and see what happens. And Ravana's just like, man, you're asking about Sylvie, you're asking this, you know, about C-20, like, I don't know what your deal is right now or whatnot, but all I've been doing is trying to protect you. Like, you know, just like talks about like how I saw what, you know, this variant did to C-20's mind and scrambled it so bad, I'm not gonna risk you going in there. Almost like this kind of like love. And then she, like, it's one of those, like, if you're into the girl, she's now giving you all these signs that she's into you. Like, I'm doing this out of, you know, to protect you because I care about you. And then she, like, later on is going to hit you with the, but you're in the friend zone. Like, we do all this stuff because, you know, we're friends against time, you know. Like, at that point, Mobius is like, all right, you know, and kind of raises, takes a sip, and he's like, so where are you going to put this? And he presents, you know, Sylvie's blade, you know, the next trophy for Ravana's trophy room. And she's like, I don't know. And she takes it up, and she ends up putting it in, like, the only most logical place. She leans it up against the thing that's holding clearly what would have been her pruning stick from back when she was a hunter. But while she's doing that, Mobius takes his tempad out, snags hers, which is just sitting on the table, puts his there, puts hers in his pocket, and then is like, it's a perfect spot for it, and I guess I should finish this guy. I ought to go. And Ravana immediately is like, only one drink, Mobius? Like, what's your deal? He's like, I'm shot, man. Like, this whole thing has just been a lot. I need to go, like, clear my mind. And she's like, all right, like, that's fine. And, you know, lets him leave. And we go back to wherever it was B-15 was taking Sylvie, which is out in front of the rocks cart in the middle of the hurricane. You know, B-15 is picked up enough that she knows, if I need to ask questions and not, like, have something be seen that could create a timeline split at any point, or some sort of a nexus event, like, she's most likely figuring if I ask this question and it happens here, that maybe creates a nexus event. If I do it inside of this hurricane, I'll be able to hide the conversation. So outside of the rocks cart, Sylvie thinks she's like, all right, so you just wanted to have a fair fight. Like, let's do this. And B-15's like, I saw something. Like, I remember what you did to me. Like, tell me what you did. And, she's like, look, I can't create memories. Like, this isn't fictional. All I can do is access what's already there. And, like, you were a person before you were a TVA agent. And they wiped your mind, and you're a variant just like me. And B-15 immediately is like, show me. And so Sylvie touches her, puts her in the enchantment, and, like, again, I keep stressing, like, the impressiveness of the performances. Masako just goes to this place where her eyes are closed, and it's all just slight noises and internal and slight variations on her face where you can tell that, like, she's seeing the moment that the TVA took her out of the timeline. Like, Sylvie's revealing her origin, her TVA origin to her, and it is having a unbelievable impact on B-15, and she just is so good. And as they come out of it, like, Masako kind of opens her eyes and all that emotion is just immediately there, and she's like, I looked happy, and just like the heartbreaking way she says it. And that's where they cut to go back to Mobius. You're just like, she's so freaking good. And we now have a new TVA agent that's gonna be on our side because she now knows the full truth. So when we go back to Mobius, he is in the archives, just kind of hiding out and going through Ravana's tempad, and he basically, like, is accessing, like, the history and sees, like, the file on C20, and it says that she's deceased, and he's reading it over or whatever, and it looks like he's almost about to close the tempad, and he stops, and he pushes, like, something, and clearly it was, like, a link to a video. It's the last video of C15. It's her interrogation before she gets pruned. And you see her. She is lucid as anything, man. Like, she is 100% there, and she's like, I'm a variant. I know that I'm a variant. Like, the TVA is lying to us. Like, this is all ridiculous. And as she's going on, you hear Ravana go, we need to end this. And, like, she comes in and looks, and you zoom, like, you see Mobius zoom in on, like, sure enough, Ravana is the one that is the cause of C20's death, not Sylvie messing with her mind. And now all Mobius knows is that Loki was telling the truth. He doesn't know everything that they're lying about, but he now knows for sure that the TVA and the person that he's closest to, right? Like, his best friend, and you'd have to at least imagine from his perspective a potential love interest, like, just lied to his face. And if she's lying, then yeah, maybe the TVA is lying. So Mobius heads back to Loki. And he immediately is like, do you think you deserve to be alone? And Loki's like, what do you... And again, the energy from both of them here is so good as they start to kind of get into one of these back and forths. And Loki's like, what are you talking? And Mobius is like, just cut the crap, Loki. Like, do you think that you deserve to be alone? He's like, the Nexus event that you two caused on Lamentus, just because of whatever this attraction connection thing is that you have, was big enough to take this whole thing down. So we better understand what it was that you were feeling. And Loki's like, we... And he, Mobius is like, just tell me, did she implant those memories on C20? And Loki's like, no, I believe her. Like, they were memories. He's like, well, then I guess I gotta trust two Lokis. And you see Loki, like, immediately start to go, like, the guy from episode 2 is back. Like, my buddy that I can kind of rely on inside the TVA is here. And he kind of just grins. I love it so much. And he's like, how about a friend instead of, like, a pair of Lokis? And, like, Mobius kind of smiles, and they go back through the door to, of course, Ravana and a bunch of hunters just standing and waiting. And as soon as Mobius comes in, he knows what's up. And he's like, hey, Ravana, what's going on? She's like, I believe you have something of mine. He's like, yes. He's like, I didn't even realize that I grabbed yours until I got down there. He's like, so, like, we can exchange it or whatever. And, like, you can tell, especially on the second watch, because I didn't know this was coming, but Mobius 100% knows what's coming next. And once he kind of, like, says what he says and Ravana doesn't respond at all, he just goes, you know where I would go? Wherever it was that I was from before this. Like, back to my timeline, back to the life that I actually had. Like, a life where maybe I actually had a jet ski. And you just hear Ravana go prune him. And gone! I I almost lost it. And it's like, we see the same thing happen to Loki at the end of the episode, right before the post-credit where we confirm that he isn't dead. But, like, that didn't even hit me as... Like, it caught me off guard as you saw my reaction. I was like, oh, shoot. Like, now is this Sylvie's show? Like, what is happening? And also, like, in the back of your head, like, in the trailers, I've seen a bunch of stuff with Loki that we haven't seen, but, variations could be anything. But then they obviously confirm it at the end of the episode. But when they took out Mobius, and you don't know that the pruning sends you to a place, like, it doesn't actually delete you, it was the biggest gut punch. And I think the emotional response I had after that has everything to do with Hiddleston's performance, because his face and heartbreak in his face, because everything that he's done has now led to this genuinely good person. Like, Mobius is a good dude, and now he's gone, and, like, that's Loki's fault, but it's also the TVA's fault because they're all a bunch, of liars. So, like, it's all hitting him, and Hiddleston's face from the moment that it happens to the moment that they drag him all the way in front of the elevators to the Timekeepers, like, it's just stellar face act, like, facial acting, and it hit me in a way where I was like, this is gonna be like one of the saddest things to happen in any of these shows thus far. And Ravonna then goes to get Sylvie, and she walks into the interrogation room, and I gotta say, man, like, Sophia DiMartino looks phenomenal. Like, the look of Sylvie with wet hair because she was in the rain, like, it's like the best version of her look, I think, in the whole show to date. And she's just sitting there with her feet up, on a desk, and Ravonna comes in and sees that she's soaking wet, asks, like, the guard that's there, she's like, who came in here? And he's like, we're sorry, man, B-15 insisted. And she's immediately, like, locked things down. B-15's also been compromised. Like, they're gonna need to prune her just the same way that they, pruned Mobius. And, like, in the moment, as soon as they called her out like that, I was like, oh, dude, I hope we get to see, like, Wunmi Masaku kick some ass next week. And that could theoretically still be in play, but she does not get any ass-kicking moments, really, in this one. But nevertheless, here she's compromised. Go prune her. They take Sylvie, they lead her to the elevators. Loki's there, and I love this, man. Like, as they both kind of, like, are standing there in front of the doors, as soon as she comes in, she goes, "Are you okay?" Like, immediately to Loki, which just, like, confirms that, like, everything that Loki is feeling would have to seem that Sylvie at least is feeling a genuine portion of that, right? Like, she trusts him, she wants to make sure he's okay, like, looks at him as a partner in crime at the very least at this point. But it certainly feels like, just in that moment, like, it's just kind of the confirmation, like, the vibe that they're having together is a mutual thing. And, Loki just kind of, like, nods, and Ravonna's like, all right, I got it from here. And Sylvie immediately asks Ravonna, like, do you remember me? And Ravonna immediately says yes. And then she's like, so what was my Nexus event? Like, what was so important that you had to come take a little girl, like, away from her life, like a criminal? And, Ravonna's like, what does it matter? And Sylvie's like, what does it matter? Like, all of this is happening because of that moment. Like, what was the Nexus moment? What was the event that so drastically changed the timeline that you had to come get me? And Ravonna's just like, and, like, there's pure disdain and enjoyment. Like, her voice, disdain, the look on her face, pure enjoyment as she says, I don't remember. And that's because she knows that there was no Nexus event. Like, that's the thing that seems to be the most obvious from that flashback that we see at the beginning of the episode. Like, Lady Loki didn't cause a Nexus event. The TVA just came in and took her. And Ravonna clearly knows that, which is why I think she is clearly connected to whoever is actually behind the TVA, which now screams louder than ever that Kang is probably that person. But nevertheless, after that, the doors open, and we are in the same sanctum that we were in that, scene where that flashback that we had at the start. Only this time, instead of it being really dark and, the timekeepers being silhouetted with those glowing eyes, the room's lit, and it's got this dope, like we said before, kind of like tealish, like blue-green kind of general tone to everything in the room. You got like all the smoke machines are going crazy as just smoke kind of like is wafting in the room, and the timekeepers are literally in chairs that are attached to a wall. Like their feet aren't even on the ground. So like when it's revealed that they're robots, like it makes all the more sense that they're up on the wall the way that they are. But they're up there, and they got this cool, like, the red glowing, I guess, timekeeper sign or whatever is behind them. There's red glowing lights on the floor to kind of help light things up. You know, and, I mean, the production design here is just, like, absolutely stellar. And then the timekeepers address, you know, the variants. And right away, like, while I was watching it, I was like, there's something off with their voices. Like, they don't sound like they're there in the room, you know, almost sounds like they're coming through a speaker. And not as much with the main timekeeper, but the other two dudes, like, when they talk, it's, like, almost hard to hear them. The one guy, you literally have to put subtitles on to understand just the way that he speaks, because he ends everything with, like this tick noise. But, like, just right out the gate, I was like, it's a weird, like, production choice. Like, it almost feels like it was like bad audio that nobody went back and corrected. But, like, at the end of the day, you're like, well, they're these crazy omnipotent, like, time god beings, so like maybe that's just what they sound like, although you would have thought it'd be more, there was like a hollowness to their voices rather than like a booming thunder that you would have expected from, like, you know, time gods basically. So, you know, Loki just basically straightens up is like, did you guys bring us here to kill us? Because, like, by all means, he's like, I've lost the number of times I've been killed, so bring it. And you know, I think it's like the third guy just starts going off about, like, his bravado, you know, like, they're all kind of bickering back and forth, and he's like, your bravado doesn't threaten us, and Sylvie, like, steps up right away. She's like, I think you're wrong. Like, you're lying about that. Like, you're scared of us. Like, there's no doubt. And she kind of goes to move forward, and Ravana, like, rewinds her in, you know, back to her spot, and she starts to go again, and as she starts to step forward, Ravana goes to do it, and then, like, it's like the tempad glitches, and the elevators open, and who's there but B-15, and she reaches out with, like, a little clicker. She clicks, both collars drop off, and you're like, yes, it is go time. And I love B-15 is, like, for all time, always. And then, like, throws down, like, tosses Sylvie her blade so that the Lokis can fight. She takes on, or goes to take on these two, you know, other guards. And like I said, she doesn't really get too much action. We're like, I hope that Wumi Masaku gets a dope action beat next episode, because they just knock her out, like, real fast, and she's unconscious, and they never prune her. Like, I went back and, like, watched, and you can see her on the floor the entire rest of the scene. Like, she is unconscious, but she is not pruned. So I hope there's a chance that Wumi Masaku can throw down a little bit next week. But once that happens, then the fight breaks out, you know, with the Lokis, and Loki takes on about 3 guards. Sylvie tosses him her blade, so he has that, and she turns to take on Ravana and, like, picks up one of the pruning sticks, which I didn't realize, because you're always seeing the handheld ones, but they have these super long ones that are more like staffs that have a pointed end, which is actually exactly what Gugu Mbatha Ra is holding right there. And then it's got the pruning, you know, nodule on the top. And they start fighting, and, you know, Ravana gets her and is, like, bringing the pruning stick right to her face, and Sylvie flips her over, and as she flips her over and just straight up, like, punches her so hard, knocks her out cold. Loki finishes up killing the last 2 dudes, and it's just the 2 of them. And you gotta figure, like, the next move is to go back to the Timekeepers, and, like, Loki comes down the steps, he gives Sylvie back the blade, and as they're about to do whatever they're about to do, the middle Timekeeper is like, Sylvie, you're a daughter of the timeline, like, we can talk about this. And this was a moment that as soon as he said Sylvie, I was like, if they're omnipotent god-like beings, okay, it makes sense they would know that she changed her name, because she told it to Loki. So if they can actually see the timeline, they can see all things, like, they would have seen that moment, like, happen. But outside of that moment, and the fact that Loki tells Mobius, who tells Ravana, nobody but those 2 inside the TVA know that her name is Sylvie. Which means if they know that her name is Sylvie, they're either A, listening into Ravana's, like, there are bugs in Ravana's room so they can hear all the conversations, or Ravana told whoever it is behind the scenes, like, they think her name is Sylvie, or what. Like, the only way they could possibly know that is if somebody in the TVA that knows it. Ravana is on the inside. That's the vibe that I'm getting, especially once it's confirmed that they're androids. And as soon as he says that, she's like, oh yeah? And she just throws her freaking blade, and you're like, yes! Decapitates this dude, and you're like starting to go nuts. And then you see sparks. And then, like, the way the head rolls down, there's sparks flying off the head. And then, like I said at the top of all this, like, the two other timekeepers start, like, maniacally laughing and freaking out. And, like, they didn't get touched, right? Like, the only one that got damaged was the middle one. And they kind of start spasming, freaking, and laughing, and then just turn off. Which means whoever's behind the scenes operating these guys, like the freaking Wizard of Oz, as soon as they see that, they're just like, well, I guess it's all out in the open now, right? Like, we're gonna find out who this person is. And that's probably what they're laughing at before they just turn all the power off and bounce. But the minute that they come down and you realize that it's an android, like, Sylvie picks up the head. Like, she's about to go, I think, ham on the other two, and Loki stops her, and she walks over to the head. You see them laugh. They turn off. She picks up the head. And, like, kudos on the visual effects, man, because the head looks really good when she picks it up, like, upside down. It's holding just the way, like, it's moving and whatnot. Like, very, very realistic. You know, and, like, Sylvie she can't believe this, man. Like, she is completely crushed to the point where she's like, they're mindless androids. Like, my whole life has been trying to get to this point, and it's not even real. And Loki is just sitting there, like, in pure disbelief. Like, he says, like, it never ends, and he's clearly, or it never stops, and he's, like, clearly talking about, like, the deception. Everybody's lying, especially people in power, man. Like, the people in power are always full of it. And, like, here it is, once again. You know, like, it never stops. And then he asks the question that we've all been asking from day one. Well, if they're freaking robots, who created the TVA? And as he's, asking this question, you see, like, Sylvie looks dejected, and he's dejected, and he has this realization, like, this is it, man. Like, after this, I don't know where we go next, but wherever it leads to, it's probably not going to be something we survive. And he's just like, Sylvie, wait, I've got to, like, tell you something. And, like, it's obvious that he's trying to tell her how he feels and has no clue how to do it. At one point, he literally even says, he's like, this is new for me. Like, I don't even know what I'm doing. And right as he's about to you think he's going to kiss her instead, right? Like, I can't. She's like, just spit it out, Loki. Like, what are you trying to say? And it looks like he's about to go in, and then all of a sudden, he gets, like, this shock and pain look in his face, and the middle of his body starts to dissipate out, and there's Ravana with a pruning stick, and you're just like, oh my gosh, they just took out Loki. And like I said, when they took out Mobius, that one hit me, because you had Loki's response right away, and you don't get to link, like, it's a slow down scene, like, you really stay with Loki. You don't get that here, and instead we get this kind of, like, just pure shock, and then Sylvie's got to deal with, Ravana, and immediately, like, disarms her, gets her on the ground, and Ravana's just like, do it. And when she said it, I was like, if it's Kang behind everything, and she's, like, in cahoots with him, like, is the relationship not a loving relationship, but more of a fear relationship, where Ravana's just like, go ahead, do it, like, or is it the fact that Ravana knows that if she gets pruned, she doesn't get wiped out of the timeline, she gets sent back to some other place, because that's what we see happens to Loki. And, Sylvie's immediately like, I'm not going to do that, because you're going to tell me everything. And credits come up, we get the animated credit sequence, and then we get this post scene where we see, Loki wakes up on the ground, and he's like, is this hell? Like, am I dead? And then you hear this voice, and it is the voice of Richard E. Grant coming through going, not yet, but if you don't come with us, you will be. And the camera swings over, and as you saw my reaction, I freaked immediately, because I was like, Kid Loki, because he's dead center. But you have 4 Loki variants. You have Kid Loki, who's dead center. You have a classic Loki that is the costume that Richard E. Grant is wearing. It's the exact look from Loki's first appearance in the comics. And just wonderful, very much like WandaVision. Like, to see that classic old school look pop up, and in a way where it looks kind of like a Halloween costume. Like, it looks so accurate to the original, like, images. I love that. And then, obviously, I did a little digging after the episode. We get 2 Lokis that don't come from the comics. One is a crocodile that Kid Loki is holding and is clearly a Loki because he has the crown and the horns on. So unless, like, they've decided to give Kid Loki a pet crocodile, there is a crocodile version of Loki. And I swear to God, if it talks or it does magic or it does something cool, I'm going to be the happiest human being next week. And then there is this huge dude. And he's got, like, the furs on, very Norse mythology looking, and he's got this crazy looking hammer. And I guess when you go through the credits, I think it's the German credits, translate out into boastful Loki. And when I saw the hammer, I was like, I wonder if that's the hammer, like if that's Mjolnir from that universe, and this Loki has taken on the identity of Thor. Which could lead to a boastful Loki, because Thor is kind of boastful. But nevertheless, you get these 4 variations now, or 4 variants, that we're going to ride with, clearly, in next episode. And the other thing is it appears that the background, where they are, is a destroyed New York City. There's one building that structurally, from the shape, looks a lot like Avengers Tower if it had been destroyed and, like, fallen down. But it looks like you're in some decimated area of New York, and that's where we're going next week. And I'm just sitting here going, man, this show is just it's so good, man. Like, it just makes me talk about it for way too long. And I appreciate you guys hanging around and checking out, whatever sections of the video that you check out. I'd rather just empty the tank so that you have everything. And then that always makes me feel like I didn't miss saying anything. But this show is just it's so good. And, like, this episode in particular, like I said in my non-spoiler, it's my favorite. I think it's the best one of the show so far because it's doing everything that the first 3 episodes did. It's mixed in the action. It's got a fantastic score going on. The story beats are very interesting. I love the relationships between Loki and Mobius and Loki and Sylvie and the strained relationship between Mobius and Ravonna, how B-15 is swinging around. And, like, then we get the biggest reveal that we've gotten. Like, we get to confirm that, like, the Timekeepers aren't real, or maybe they were real at one point. But clearly somebody got to them and has now turned them into robots to try to trick everybody into thinking that they're still a thing, much like the Wizard of Oz. So Loki, 4 episodes in, man, this thing is in a full-on sprint, and I just cannot wait for next week to see what we get, as we have only 2 episodes left. But that's it, man. Those are all of my spoiler thoughts. I emptied the tank big time on this one. Like I said, I appreciate you guys sticking it out with me. Hope you enjoyed what we had to talk about here. But that's it. That's all I got. Now it's your turn, man. I want you to hit those comments. Go crazy! Hit all the spoilers, all the things that you want to talk about. What popped out for you in this episode? What theories do you have going on? Do you think Kang is behind the TVA? Do you think Kang could be still the reason, Sylvie is doing all the things that she's been doing? What was her ultimate goal? Was she just trying to create a distraction with all of those reset charges, or was there a bigger plan at play? Who's telling the truth? Who's not? What are you digging? What are you not digging? Is it working? Do you like the variants we get at the end? Are you pumped about the post-credit? Means we'll probably have post-credits in the next 2 episodes. Anything you're thinking, man. Good, bad, indifferent about Loki Episode 4, the Nexus event. Down below in the comments section. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out with the old C-Man as we approach our final 2 weeks of Loki. You just like what I'm doing when I'm talking movies or TV, trailer reactions. You just want to be here for it all. You want to just show a little love support for this old guy. Well, hey, jump over there, man. Come join C-Maniac Nation by hitting that subscribe button. Hit that little bell if you want those alerts. And until next time, for the C-Man's Cinema Sit Down. I've been the C-Man, and I am signing off. Peace. Oh, hey, what's going on? You must be sticking around because you're looking for more content featuring this guy. Well, guess what? You're in the right place. You can check out more videos right here and right here. And if you have and you want to come join that C-Maniac Nation, you can hit that subscribe right over there.